Okay, alhamdulillah. No, we're good. We're good. Yes, I did. All right. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wa salam ala Sayyidil Anbiya wa Mursaleen Nabiyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Amma ba'd. Miguel, can you just turn these front lights off? So last time we had started talking about, let's see, is this working? Supposedly. Can you just touch the, okay, alhamdulillah, that's working. So we said, does everything come from the Imam? And this is a discussion that we had started last time. What did we say? All of the rulings that the madhāhib have, can they be traced back to an Imam? No, they can't, right? It's not realistic because it's not possible that one individual gave rulings on every single issue in Islam. So there are many theorizations that came afterward, and we said that when an individual rules within a madhab, when he rules within a legal school of thought, what is the process behind it? Is it that he just goes and he keeps researching all of the Imam's statements and then comes to a ruling, or what happens?
They take the Imam's principles.
Okay.
And then there are rulings,
Mm-hmm.
new rulings.
Ahsant.
In addition to his.
Exactly. So what happens is that when in these different individual schools of thought, basically, what do they differ in? They differ with how to deal with the text. And what is the text in Islam? The Quran and the Sunnah. The Quran and Sunnah, these are the two bases of our religion. And if we understand that these are the two bases of our religion, this is what is being returned back to. And the disconnect, so when you have the text and you have the ruling, where does the disconnect happen? Like, shouldn't it be like a direct line?
How you utilize.
Right, how it's being utilized. So you know who comes in the middle? People, right? So anytime you have people in the middle of something, what happens? People make mistakes. It's very natural. People have different understandings. You have a different perspectives on how to deal with things, and they have a different methodology on how to approach these texts. Because at the end of the day, every Imam was a product of his environment, and there are certain things and there are different challenges and different issues that they all faced. So the uṣūl works were mainly written after the rise of the madhāhib. What does that tell us? Or what can we understand from that? Except for who? Remember, there's one exception to this. Imam Shāfi, right? Shāfi was the exception. But other than him, you find a lot of the uṣūl works, they came later. So what lesson can we take away from that?
Sort of form the basis for
Okay, so what does that mean? Like, what is a practical application of saying the madhāhib form the basis of uṣūl? Meaning what?
Codification.
The codification happened first, and then the theory came later, right? That's one way to understand it. And some people will argue the other way around, saying, no, it's actually the theory that came first, and from the theory came the rulings. We're just showing and bringing out what the theory is behind those rulings. So we said uṣūl fiqh, it's the relationship between uṣūl fiqh and what the purpose was. The purpose of uṣūl fiqh was actually to help an individual develop those academic tools, right? To actually expand his mind, so he learns how to deal with the text. So, which is what ijtihad is. So what happens is that there are limitations. When you start putting rules, you're naturally putting limits, right? You can't just understand things as you feel. And not just that, there are going to be knowledge gaps. And did ijma' actually occur, right? Was there a scholarly consensus behind a particular issue? If I just trust the mujtahid, and any mujtahid, he says there is ijma' on this issue, and he's from my madhab, will I actually go and check if the ijtihad happened? No, not necessarily. And this happens, right? And it's unfortunate, it happens more often than not. And even in ulūm al-hadith, if you have a major scholar within the madhab making a ruling, and he's basing that ruling off of a weak hadith, which also happens. But I am from the madhab, am I going to go back now to where he got his ruling from? Not necessarily. It's going to be enough for me to trust the mujtahid, right? Because we said the opposite of the mujtahid is the muqallid, right? And the muqallid, the most that he can do is work within the realm of the mujtahideen. You have a question, Nazim? Or?
Yeah.
I felt like something clicked. Or there can be a misapplication, right? Even if I don't have any of these knowledge gaps, it's very natural for me, if I have a methodology, if I misapply that methodology, if I overlook something, these things are very natural. Working within the madhab itself, that brings its own restrictions. So there are a couple of English resources that I do want to share with you guys. The first is this. This is a series of lectures on al-Waraqāt by one of my good friends, Salman Nasir. It's from the Legacy Institute. I'll share the link with Ramsha, and then she'll put it in the group, inshallah. It is basically a lot more detailed than the I'm sorry?
Can you add me to the group?
She's the one. All right. So he's done an excellent job in terms of gathering the number of resources. His specialty actually is in fiqh. So he enjoys these uṣūli discussions a lot more than I do, and he'll bring a number of more references. There's a book, Introduction to uṣūl al-fiqh by Farhan Zubairi, that was lended to me by Nazim. It's good. I like the structure. I don't like a lot of the way everything is presented. But the structure is, he did a very good job with it. It's actually used in a seminary somewhere, right? The Institute of Knowledge or something. And lastly, there's an explanation of Waraqāt. There are a few famous explanations. One of the more famous ones is by Mahalli, Jamaluddin Mahalli. He's the one who is famous for, do you guys know? There's Jalaluddin Mahalli, I'm sorry. He is famous for the Tafsir Jalalain, and he is the second Jalal, right? The second one is Jalaluddin as-Suyuti. This is translated by Musa Ferber. I think it's available on Amazon. I'm not sure. It's okay. Oh, okay. All right, alhamdulillah. And I mean, it's not long. You have longer explanations of Waraqāt also available, but the book is not meant to be spent a lot of time on. Why do you guys think that is?
Just use these characters.
It's just an introductory book. It's not even like I mean, it's not a very long book. It's a very short matan in and of itself. It's a very short text just to introduce somebody into the science. So we're going to talk a little bit about the author. The author is Abdul Malik ibn Abdullah ibn Yusuf Abu Ma'ali ibn Rukn al-Islam Abi Muhammad al-Juwayni al-Naysaburi al-Shāfi'i. So Imam al-Juwayni, he was called Imam al-Haramain. And the reason he was called Imam al-Haramain is he actually made Hajj. And when he went to make Hajj, he stayed in Mecca. He stayed in Mecca for some time, and he traveled also to al-Medina. So when he traveled to Mecca and he traveled to Medina, he actually prayed, and it's even that he led in both places. We got to do something about this wire. But he led Salah in both those places, which is why he was called Imam al-Haramain. This was actually a very unique. So you just unplug the HDMI cable and plug it back in. Yeah. Yeah, it's okay. So he led in both places.
Uh-oh. We don't want that.
Yeah, minimize. Can you just click on it? So he led prayer in both places. He taught in Madrasa al-Islamiyya. So Madrasa al-Islamiyya was in Naysabur, which is in modern day Iran. Right. So Iran was a very famous center of knowledge. You had Ray, you had people from Awaz. Dawud was from there. Sahi was from there. Ibn Majah was also from there. Sorry. Ghazali was also from there, right? So you had a number of, there was a lot of Sunni scholarship very early in Islam. It's called Madrasa al-Islamiyya because it is based off of the one who was the biggest patron for the Madrasa, which is who was
Turkish Okay. That was copy pasted from his
system.
Yes.
His governance. Okay. He's considered a major reference point in the madhab. So he has the famous book that we're studying now, al-Waraqāt. His most famous work in uṣūl, and probably his most famous work in period is al-Burhan. And then he has a book also in fiqh, which is called al-Matlab. Al-Matlab, the unique thing about this book is one of the few books in a madhab that actually talks about the mechanics of how he reached excellent book, and to actually get into the thought process of Imam al-Haramain on why he made certain rulings. And it's a great method of application of his uṣūl, or of the principles that he lays forward here. So what happened is, from the Nihayat al-Matlab, you have Ghazali, who he basically summarizes it into significantly shorter works. One of the ones, al-Wasit, and then I believe they're all printed now. Some of them have been they're critical editions from different universities, but I'm pretty sure they've all been printed. Ghazali Ghazali, he took so much interest in his teacher because he was his teacher. He was one of his main teachers when he was in the Islamia, star student, and he benefited a lot from him. And you can see the influence of Juwayni on Ghazali when he actually looked at his works. Any questions? So we said Nihayat al-Matlab is one of the most famous ones. Al-Waraqāt is the one that we're seeing now. It doesn't actually represent his final conclusions. So if going through Waraqāt is not going to give us insight into Imam al-Haramain's foundational legal theory versus his longer work, which is Burhan. Burhan is a significantly longer work, and if you want to actually know the positions that Imam al-Haramain had, that's the one that you want to go to. He has a book, Kitab al-Talqis, which is a summary of Taqrib al-Irshad, Iman al-Baqillani. Baqillani was Mu'tazili. He was a rationalist. He was Ashari, معلش يا أخي. He's one of the Imams, and it's another book of uṣūl. Burhan, again, his most well-known work. So al-Waraqāt is the book that we will be studying, and like I said, it's very traditional in many schools to start with this work because it is so short, and it is a very classical work. It is a very early work. I don't think there's any. There's a Hanbali work that follows this one by Abi Ya'la. And Maliki works. They all come later. So Waraqāt is pretty early. I don't think there's anything significant in the other madhāhib before this one. I'll have to go back and check. Waraqāt is leaflets or pieces of paper. And the reason he calls it Waraqāt is it's just it's a very small book. Yeah, it's just a collection. Shāfi. Yeah. So he starts his book off by defining what uṣūl al-fiqh is, and he uses, now what was going to happen, he's going to mention a bunch of terminologies that it's important for us to be familiar with when we talk about legal theory. Al-asl is that which is built upon, or it's the opposite of a far'. Far' means that something else is built upon it. So when you hear words like uṣūl and you hear words like furu', so where this is also very common in issues of belief, right? So if we talk about uṣūl Iman, or the foundations of Iman, what are those? Or uṣūl al-Islam, what are those?
Like belief in the messengers.
Mumtaz. So we talk about uṣūl Iman, we're talking about the 6 pillars of Iman, and we talk about uṣūl al-Islam, right? The 5 pillars of Islam. So what about furu' al-Iman? So when I talk about the branches of Iman or things that are not foundational, what are some examples of those? Ihsan it's related, but it's a little bit different. Like for example, the signs of the hour. Good. What else? Dajjal, right? It's not from the 6 pillars. What else? The coming of Isa, alayhi salam. Again, it's not from jinn. Ahsant. Good. Right. So none of those things are actually from the bases or from the uṣūl of Iman. Islam, fara' Islam. What is some like miswak? This is something that there's nothing, it's not foundational to the religion. So again, it's just to help you guys understand what the terms are. Fiqh is very commonly used to mean understanding, but this is the definition that is preferred by most people, and it's knowledge of divinely legislated rulings arrived at through independent deductive reasoning. Basically, rulings that are arrived by ijtihad. So the ahkam that are arrived by means of ijtihad. And it's the foundations on which fiqh is built. So if you want to look at fiqh as a building, the foundation that is underneath it is going to be uṣūl al-fiqh. The legal rulings themselves, these are the ones that we will be talking about. I'll expand a little bit on these because there are more. But there are two. There are 2 types. You have ahkam taklifiyya and you have ahkam wad'iyya. Ahkam taklifiyya are probably the terms that you are all most familiar with. I don't think is there anything here or a word that you guys haven't heard before?
What's number 4?
Number 4, mahdhur. So the equivalent of this would be haram. Any other words that look strange?
Is there a reason why it's different?
Because this is the one that he uses. So, and we'll get to this. I'm going to talk about the importance or lack of importance of terminologies, because it's important to have a general like limitation in the terms that you use, because a term or a word is just a way to express an idea. But to kind of get fixated on, no, this is the better term or that is the better term, it's not really a fruitful discussion. Mandub is, what would be an equivalent to mandub? Mustahab. Mustahab sunnah is also used. Yeah. And then you have ahkam wad'iyya, and basically this is rulings associated with how to classify actions. Over here, this is associated with reward and punishment. This is how to classify actions. So not only do you have sahih and batil, you also have fasid, you also have a mani', right? Something that's prohibitive. You have azima, you have rukhsa, you have other ones than that. He just mentions and starts with these two because these are, again, this is the terminology that you will first deal with and the terminology that you will first face when you talk about how to classify actual rulings. And we'll talk about examples of each, inshallah. Yeah.
One thing is, makruh, is that like,
Disliked.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Reprehensible, it's probably a strong
What
word.
is that?
It's like a strong word. Huh?
Like
This is like really bad. Yeah. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Like, what does exactly that mean in terms of like reward?
Well, we're going to get to each of these, inshallah.
Yeah, macro is, I guess, anti-distinction there. Macro, two macro.
No, they have two. Actually, they have two types of haram, right? So you have ahkam. No, they don't. They have shismo. They do have two makruh. Ya akhi. They have tahrim and tanzihi. Ahsan. Yeah.
Tanzihi one.
Yeah.
Reprehensible.
No, that's a better word. Yeah, it's actually a better. That's a better way to translate that. So wajib is rewarded for doing and punished for omitting. Like what? Your 5 daily prayers, right? So if I do it, I get rewarded, and if I don't do it, I'm punished for it. Or this is another definition, is that which the lawgiver has given a binding command. That you are not only are you commanded to do it, but the command is, it's a strong command to do it. The difference between these two definitions, and this is more like a discussion in mantiq or a discussion in like for logicians, is what something you call hadd and rasam. And one is based off the outcome, and the other one is based like on what makes that unique in describing that action. That's all. This is the only difference between the two. Some of them will actually, they'll modify this instead of saying, yuthab fa'ilu wa yu'aqib tariku, they'll say ma yastahiq, that the one who is deserving of reward and punishment, because you can't guarantee any reward and any punishment. So, but I mean, the meaning's understood. So we had mentioned a couple examples. We said prayer was one example. What is another example? Huh? Fasting Ramadan, growing your beard. I'm sorry. Dress, like, right. So if I uncover my aura purposely, not in front of your wife, in front of your wife, mustahab, huh? Depending on how big you are, right? Also, I would say that so uncovering your aura would be something that is like the opposite is haram. So the opposite of that would be an obligation, meaning that I'm always obligated to cover my aura. Mandub, something that's recommended. So, I should have left it. So what? Anyway, khalas, you guys saw it. So mandub is the difference between this and wajib, is that if I do it, I'm going to get rewarded, but if I don't, there's no punishment. That which the lawgiver has given a non-binding command. So this is the only difference. Again, hadd and rasam, right? What is the outcome and what makes it unique? Examples. Huh? Your sunnah prayers, right? These are supererogatory prayers, right? These are the extra prayers that we perform. If I do them, I'm rewarded, and if I leave them, there's no punishment. Giving sadaqah, right? Anything that is beyond or more than giving beyond the zakat. Niyya in wudu, Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. That's when we get to Sahih and Fasid. Huh? Yeah, it's an intention before. So this is something, again, something that is mubah, that is neither rewarded nor punished. Like
green shirt or black shirt.
Okay, sure. Like colors.
I didn't say white.
Right, colors. Right. Wearing a green shirt. Like even white, even wearing a white shirt, right? It's something that's mubah. Drinking water, running,
Apple.
huh?
Eating apple.
Eating an apple, right? All of these things would be mubah. Yani there's no reward or punishment for doing it. And there's no command or prohibition for that. And we had mentioned a couple of examples. Mahdhur, prohibited, punished for doing, and reward for refraining. That which the lawgiver has given a binding command to refrain from. Examples?
Gambling.
Gambling, clearly haram.
Or alcohol.
Pork, alcohol, zina, right? Ghiba, namima, homosexual acts, right? These are all things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has clearly prohibited. Makruh, something that is disliked, you're not punished for doing and rewarded for refraining. So what is an example of something that is makruh?
We talked about last week, the staying on a grave or stepping on a grave.
Good. Ahsant, right? Sitting on a grave or walking on one. This is something that's makruh, is disliked. I'm sorry? Yeah. So like, for example, if somebody's breath smells or they've just eaten something and they come to the masjid, it is not haram, it is makruh. What else? Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. No, we already did mubah. We passed it.
Oh,
Yeah.
Alhamdulillah.
What do you say? Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Now this is something that we can, I don't even know if we could put it in that category, right? It's mubah. He said not attending my classes. So when we'll talk about it, because what is directly related to this is something called khilaf al-awla, which is not preferred. And
I like that.
yeah, you know what I mean? And there's a relationship there. We'll talk about it. We'll talk about
Wait,
it. Yeah.
For Mahabur, it's you're rewarded for the thing.
Yes.
Okay.
Any other examples that you guys could think of? Hookah? No. So this is Sheikh Salman, when he talked about it, he puts them as completely overlapping, meaning that all things that are not preferred, he says they're all makruh. I don't think so. I disagree with him. I think so. You have like, so Subki Tajuddin, he died like 771, I think. He died 771. He actually makes this a completely separate category. Most scholars don't agree with him in making it a completely separate category. But saying something is not preferred, it doesn't necessarily mean that it is makruh. It can be, right? So the things that are makruh, like, so what is something that is not preferred? Can you guys think of an example? So not praying my sunnah at all, right? So I pray my fard, but I don't pray any sunnah at all. I'm sorry? That's I see what you're saying. That's a nadar, and that's makruh, right? That's like making a promise to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is makruh, right? Saying it's basically making an oath that you're going to do something. If Allah, it's a conditional oath that, yeah, Allah, if you bless me with a child, I'm going to fast for a week. That's makruh, right? That's not going to be khilaf al-awla. Here, if I have a choice, and this is a very real example, if I have a choice between listening to Quran and listening to music, right? So over here, if neither is haram. Allahu Akbar. So if I choose to listen to Quran, or let's use Nasheed just for Uthman, right? So if I'm listening to Nasheed, or if I'm listening to Quran, it is preferred for me to listen to Quran, right? But am I doing anything wrong if I listen to Nasheed?
No.
I'm not. So over here, it is khilaf al-awla, right? It's not preferred for me to do this at this time. Playing basketball or doing dhikr. Do you guys see?
Yeah.
But and this is why I have a problem with saying that everything that is khilaf al-awla is makruh. It doesn't always fit. Yes.
In the context of something.
Yes. So khilaf al-awla is always going to be when you're comparing two actions.
Okay.
It's never going to be in by itself. Yes. Yes. Yeah. So even subhanAllah, even the rulings there, all of those are. So you guys know the Mus'haf Madni, like the Medina Mus'haf. It's like the most common one. I'm sure we have like 50 in this room, and then I don't have access to one right now. Oh, here. So you guys are all familiar with like this green Mus'haf, right? So you know all of the stops that are in there, like there's Salah and Wow and Nam and stuff like that. Do you guys know where all those rulings came from?
That's from the original Arabic.
It's not. It's actually from those are actually Hanafi rulings. Interestingly enough. So what has happened is that they're all preferred stops, and they're all from the madhāhib, and they all have to do with completing meanings, right? That's where it comes from. Even if you look at the placement of verses, it's not very clear in certain cases on this is where the verse should actually break. This is why you have a difference of opinion on how many verses there are in the Quran. You guys understand that? Even the difference of opinion between Fatiha, I don't know if you guys are aware of it, right? So what is the difference of opinion? Right? Is the basmala, is Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim a verse or not? So if I say it, absolutely not. So if Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim is not, if I say it's not a verse, then what happens? Because the Prophet ﷺ, one of the ways he described the Fatiha is what? 7 verses. He said it's 7 verses. Even Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he taught when referring back to it, he calls it as-sab'a mathani, the repeated 7. So over here, how do I deal with the verses now? Right, I have to break. There has to be a break point, right? There has to be a break point in order to bring that 7th verse in. So and it happens, right? It's something that's very common. And there's a different, yeah. So
if that is the Ahnaf wuquf,
yeah,
the Fatiha 6.
the wuquf are al-mushkila is that the adad they took from the shawafid. So it's a nice mix, and they took hafs. You know what I mean? Out of all the riwayat. So yes, I mean, I'm sorry. I think I went off on a tangent talking about something else. But yes, there's definitely points where it is recommended. There's points where it's actually, haram to read a certain way. You've seen the 3 dots, right? So they'll say you can't read it in one go. You have to stop either here or you have to stop there in order to continue. Why? Because the meaning can change. So the meaning changes, and that's a lot of waqfa ibtida. Stopping and continuing on where to read it has to do with the meanings of the verses and how they change depending on how you read them.
Also like the la.
So la is one of them too. Like you can't stop here.
What's the opposite of that?
That you have to continue. I think it's in 3 dots. I don't know. That you have to stop. I think la is the other one in the 3 dots. So there you'll have a place where there are 3 dots in 2 places. And when you have those 3 dots in 2 places, either you have to stop here and continue, or you have to stop here and continue. But you cannot stop in both places. Yes.
Does that have to happen if you're just reading, or is that
Okay, so there's a difference of opinion on that. But all scholars say that it's mustahab. It's recommended. If you're outside of prayer or during prayer, it's recommended. Meaning that if I don't do sajda, is it a problem? No, it's not an issue, except for the law hadith. Right? They say it's wajib. But everybody else says it's recommended. We actually had an issue one time. One of the imams was reading, and he got to an ayah of sajda, and he stopped, and he said Allahu Akbar. So half the jama'ah, they went into sajda, and the imam went into ruku'. Yeah. It's at the end of the surah. Yeah. It ended with the sajda. So he ended there, and then everybody was, and he didn't even stop. He's like, it was Yani ma'a sajideen or something like that. And the verse ended, and he was like, immediately after the verse ended, he said Allahu Akbar. Even I went into sajda. I was like, okay, he's going into, and then the next thing you hear was Sami Allahu liman hamida. But it's something that's recommended. Something that's recommended.
What would you do then?
So you actually have to repeat the entire unit. No, not the entire salah. His salah is okay. My prayer, I had to repeat 1 unit. So I had to repeat 1 rak'ah because I didn't do ruku' at all. Yeah. Examples of khilaf al-awla, we had spoken about them. So in even each of these have levels, right? So even the things that are wajib, there are things that are ujub. Yani there are things that are more obligatory than others. There are things that are more haram than others. There are things that are more makruh than others. Are there things that are more mandub? Mustahab. Yeah, I'm saying mubah, malish. Yeah, is there more mubah? Less mubah? No, that's just one level, right? Mubah is just one level. There's no all right, this is more mubah or that's not, less mubah. There can only be in the other ones that you have more haram or less haram or more recommended or less recommended. So the relationship between all of these is the opposite of every obligation something that is prohibited. All right, give me let's talk about it. I want examples. So here is the opposite of every obligation a prohibition. Yani, for example, praying is an obligation. Not praying is a prohibition. Like, حاتم مثال.
No, that's not how it works.
That's not how it works. طيب,
In this case.
I don't know. Give me an example. No, not praying Dhuhr. Is it? What is it? What is the ruling?
Obligation?
No.
Ah,
Why?
ah.
For example, مثلا,
Yeah.
and this has to do with حكم الوضع.
Okay.
A woman who, for example, she took wudu, she's good.
Okay.
Everything is
Ah.
good,
Yeah, yeah.
but she's on a hayd.
Uh-huh.
That salah, which was wajib on her.
It's not wajib on her aslan.
No, yeah, it's supposed to be wajib, not
Ah.
haram for her. Oh, but I'm just saying what you're saying anyway. So all that is prohibited is okay. That's why you were correct.
Yeah.
I figured that out. I should love
This-
them.
So I would say yes, right? So the opposite of every obligation is going to be a prohibition. And the opposite of every prohibition is going to be an obligation. Meaning that if it is impermissible for me to lie, it is obligatory for me to be honest and truthful, right? Does that make sense? Like, so does it apply also to these? Yes or no?
Makruh?
Is every makruh mandu is the opposite of everything that's disliked preferred? And is the opposite of everything that is preferred disliked?
Yeah.
Think about that. So here,
It's recommended to pray the sunnah.
yes.
But if you don't pray, there is no even
Can you say it's makruh?
But didn't you say if I
Makruh.
continuously khilaf al-awla?
That's another thing, right? And it is every khilaf al-awla makruh. So let me give another example. I never use siwak. Siwak is mustahab. I think بس عندكم يعني الآلة مقصود صح؟ عند الحنابلة لا.
If only people who follow al-Ramli.
Ramli? Okay. So if I never use siwak. Siwak is, we agree, it is what? It's mandub, mustahab. Like never using siwak. Is it makruh? No. I agree with you guys. I don't think this relationship is as clear. I don't think it is as binding. But you guys agree or disagree? You can disagree, it's fine. I guess everybody's scared, right? And mubah is a category all by itself, right? There's no relationship to other ahkam. But what is the thing that is unique about mubah that doesn't necessarily apply to any of these? Like that doesn't apply to any of these. So, like for example, we said drinking water, right? Drinking water is mubah. What is, huh? Yeah, right. There's it's the last one. But anyway, I was. You have some who ulama say al-asl كل شيء al-hadar. But I like this one is the one I have the mukhtar in there. But I'm saying here for mubah, there is a unique element to it that you don't find in the other rulings. And that is, what is the relationship of intention to all of these things? So for example, if I'm lying in my intention, right? I'm lying to my job, telling them that I'm sick and I'm not coming in. This is what is the ruling? But my intention is to help the poor.
well,
By going and giving at the soup kitchen.
it's haram because you're not fulfilling your contract.
Ahsant, right? So it is haram, right? And that going and helping the poor, that's a completely separate action, right? You can't link the two. So the question here is, does the intention affect the haram, the hurmat shay? Does it affect the thing being prohibited or not?
Yes.
Huh? Okay, sure. How, in what way? Hold on, you can take a share.
There are the situations that we allowed to lie, right?
I didn't. I gave a very specific situation. In this situation, did the intention affect the ruling?
No.
No, it doesn't. Okay. My intention was to spend time with my friends. Is that good? A good intention or no? To increase the brotherhood. That's not a good intention? No, just in general. I'm asking. Yeah, in general, it's a good one. But in increasing that brotherhood, I missed the Dhuhr prayer. Does my intention affect the ruling? No. Okay. Like, what about in mubah? It does. But in which way? All right. If I do it as an act of worship, if I drink water because I hope I'm taking away somebody else's water. It's like, by drinking this water, I hope to stop Miguel from drinking water. I want to hurt him somehow. Does that?
You want to save him from breaking
his fast, right? I want to stop him from that. Does my intention at that point affect the drinking of the water?
Just saving him, yes.
Like in this situation, is it really possible to hurt him? No, right? Like if I'm drinking water from the sink, what is the chances that I've actually taken away one glass worth of water away from someone else? But that is the thing with mubah, that my intention does have an effect. And not just that, the only effect it can have is what? A positive. It can only have a positive effect. And this is why in the hadith of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he talks about intention, he says, he uses the example of hijrah. He uses the example of the migration. Why? Why didn't he use prayer? Why didn't he use fasting?
Because of the man, reportedly man traveling for the sake of marriage.
Yep.
Is that you saying?
Yeah, it was, what was it? Muhajir Qais. That's what he was called. I think the hadith in Tabarani. So, but I'm asking, why did the Prophet use the example of the migration? Why not use prayer or fasting or Hajj?
Because migration can have multiple reasons.
Ahsant,
that
right? Because migration is a worldly action. Migration is a worldly action, just like drinking water, just like playing basketball. So over here, he sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he actually mentions a couple of things. He says the one who migrates for Allah and His Messenger, what happens? He gets rewarded. And the one who migrates for a worldly affair or to get married, what does he get? He gets what he intended, right? That's it. Meaning that he doesn't get anything more than that, right? He doesn't get any type of spiritual reward. He get whatever worldly intention he had, he got for that. And this is also a good example for what? Khilaf al-awla. Right? It's preferred for him to migrate for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Messenger. But if he doesn't, did anybody say to Muhajir Qais, because he migrated to marry. The woman said to him, he's like, I want to marry you. And she was like, okay. He's like, what's the mahar? And what was the mahar? That you got to migrate. And if you migrate with me, then that I will marry you. So what did he do? He did exactly that. Did the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam tell him like, oh, you had a bad intention or you were wrong? No, he didn't. He didn't. So even if we move for a job, for example, is that problematic? No. I'm moving for increased pay. I'm moving for more security. I'm moving for a better school system. These are all worldly issues. These are all worldly things that we move for. And there's nothing wrong with that being the sole intention. But I should always try to be aware and have a good intention because I want to put something positive into that.
Isn't like the job though, example,
Yeah.
Would that also be like for a man, like if they wanted to move to like better provide for his family, would that be rewarded?
Absolutely. I mean, so again, but what did he do there? If his is this a worldly intention? No, it's not. A worldly intention would be what? Like I just want more money. Right. And there's nothing wrong with that. Or I want more security. Or if I go to this job, there's more chances of me to move vertically, right? Like I can move up in position. What else? I mean, there's another problem in the hadith too. But the Prophet ﷺ said, the one who what is the first thing he mentioned? The one who migrates for? Right. So the one who migrates for Allah and His Messenger. Can I pray for Allah and His Messenger? I'll let you guys think about that one. So next section. What about bid'ah?
Ahsan. But before you continue
Yeah.
this, you know why I like the second definition that you said of ما طلب الشارع فعله جزما.
Yeah.
It's going to clarify a lot of things when you declare something haram,
Yes.
because now you have what is the proof that I'm bringing.
That
What is the
yes.
way.
Ahsan.
I like that better.
Yeah, and the thing is, why did they come up with two types of definitions? Because people have different, you know what I mean? Like there are different ways to describe things. And you'll find the people like the mantiqiyin, like the people who teach logic and study logic. The reason that they do this is because there are different types of thinking, right? There are different types of mental maps. So what about bid'ah? So out of the 5 rulings that we talked about, which one does bid'ah fall under?
This is Ibn Abdul Salam, all 5.
Haram.
Haram, okay.
Makruh.
Makruh,
It can be all 5.
wajib, mandub, mubah. All right, here. Let me ask you a different question. Which of the, so which uṣūli book talks about bid'ah?
Non-Muslim.
It's fat 0. Why? Because it's not a hukum. It's a description. A hukum, it's not a ruling.
Oh,
Right? It's not a. If I say something is a bid'ah, I haven't put a ruling on it. And this is why you have none of the legal theorists mentioning it. Right. So how is it defined? What is bid'ah?
The absence of a ruling?
The absence of a ruling? No, you can't. The absence of a ruling is going to be mubah. Right? So over here, this is the opinion of my sheikh, Hatim al-Awni, and I think it's a beautiful definition. He says here, anything attributed to the religion, and this is what we're talking about, religious bid'ah now. We're not talking about worldly bid'ah. Like, for example, car is an innovation. Airplanes are an innovation, right? Compressed wood, camels.
No, I mean, we should all.
We should all ride camels again. Not a bad idea. So basically, anything attributed to the religion that we can say with certainty, yes, that it is not from it. Like what? Praying 5 rakah for dhuhr. It's not from the religion at all. Increasing, we all get together, we're like, man, poor people need more money. We're about to up the zakat to 3%. It's too many people in Dhul Hijjah to make Hajj. Let's do one in Rajab too. It's not going to work, right? These are all clear innovations.
like
Yeah.
like income tax innovation.
Income tax is a worldly thing, right? What is the religion, like what is the religious basis for an income tax?
Nothing.
There's nothing, right? It's all it is an organizational tax,
Yeah.
right? It's a logistic tax. It's not something that what is the difference between zakat and regular taxes? Taxes are usually used for what? For government services, right? So if I pay property tax, where does my property tax money go? It goes to the local school system, it goes to the police department, and it goes to the fire department, right? Those are all services that I use. So basically I'm paying for those services. Or if I pay federal income tax, I use it to pay who? The federal workers. I use it to pay federal representatives who are doing different, or supposedly doing different jobs for for us and working on our behalf. So when we talk about, put your tax dollars to work, meaning that hold the people who you are paying with your money accountable for that. So when we say here with certainty, and the reason I like this addition is because you remove all issues of ijtihad. You remove all issues of ijtihad. So for example, in wudu, in the Hanafi madhab, after you finish wiping your head, what do? You wipe your neck. This is based off of a weak hadith. But there are a number of people who will now call it what? They will call it a bid'ah. They say, why do they call it bid'ah? They say you're adding something to the wudu. Just like we said about the prayer, right? When you add a fifth rak'ah, you've added something to it. Why can this not be a bid'ah? Because it's an issue of ijtihad. Anytime you have ijtihad an issue, every time you have difference of opinion in something, immediately it can no longer be called an innovation. It can no longer be called a bid'ah. And this will remove what major issue that splits communities? The Mawlid. The Mawlid is the celebration of the birthday of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the moment that we say that there is a difference of opinion in something, because are there scholars who support it? Absolutely. I can give you a list of scholars that do. Huh? Ibn Kathir minhum. Yeah, Suyuti minhum. You know what I mean? You have Ibn Kathir is like the biggest. Sorry, Salafi. Right? So, you know what I mean? So the Suyuti, very famous also. But the thing is, like, there's a list of scholars. And the reason that I mention it is not because I'm convincing anyone to say, okay, no, this is something you should do or something you shouldn't do. But the moment we say that, okay, yes, this is something that there's ijtihad behind it. There's deductive reasoning that went into this. There's scholarly research that went into it. I can no longer say it is a innovation. Innovation applies to very clear things. If I said, for example, that, you know what, you guys, we should start fasting on Wednesdays. Why? Because there's more barakah on Wednesday. What do you guys think about that?
The second part ruined it.
The second part ruined it. But if I said, hey guys, we should fast on Wednesdays, there's nothing wrong with that. Or, hey guys, let's make dua after Isha. Is that a problem? No. If I say we need to make dua after Isha because this is a specific blessed time. No, this is where it becomes a problem, right? The moment I start assigning specific virtues that I have neither from the Quran nor from the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, this is where it becomes a problem. But are there certain issues we don't have from the Quran or Sunnah that most of the scholars have said, no, this is something that is blessed? They're very specific. They're limited. Like what? Nisf Sha'ban. So like the 15th of Sha'ban, all the madhāhib agree that there is blessing in that night. Do we have any verses that indicate that? No. We don't have any hadith to indicate that. But like I said, these issues are they're very rare. You don't have too many. I sent. It's a very good question. So over here, and I had this discussion before. I don't know if it was with you. Yeah. والله أنا بحثت يعني حتى أنا ما وجدت. There is? There is in Sunan al-Kubra?
Yeah, he mentions them.
Okay.
Al-Hakim mentions them.
Oh, so I have to go look then, because I don't remember coming across them. Yeah. So like in like it's about, you know, the one who prays at that night, there's a reward, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But like I said, you know, and all the madhāhib know that the hadith are weak, right? You even have scholars in the madhāb will say this hadith is weak, but they'll still say that you should celebrate that night. And the thing is, there are certain sciences, and I'll use hadith and fiqh as examples. Like, for example, if I want to find out about a narrator, like somebody who's in the chain of narration, who's relaying hadith, how do I find out about him? Right, so I have to go back to the book. Me, as a person who's now living in 1443, I have to go back to these books written about people who died in like the hundreds. Right, so it's like we're talking about a 1300-year gap. And what I find in the books about him, is this enough information for me to come to a concrete ruling on the person? To me, as an individual, subjectively, possibly. This is why you have scholars as early as Ibn Salah, who died late 6th century, who said that it is not possible for any of us to make a ruling on a isnad. I mean, to make a ruling on a hadith. You can make a hukum on a particular chain, but you can't rule on a hadith. And the reason for that is if you actually think about it, is the scholars at that time, the ones who actually put the books together, if they wanted to find out about a narrator, you know what they would do? They would go to the village. They would talk to him. So they had access to resources that we just don't have access to today. And sometimes you will find Imams like Bukhari or Nasa'i, all that you'll find next to the narrator's name is Saduq, that he was trustworthy. Or he was honest. So when I see that it's written Saduq here, that he was honest, what more can I find out about him? Nothing, because that's all that's written there. But what did Imam Bukhari do?
He read biography.
Right, so he has he has a Tarikh al-Kabir, which is one of his more famous works on biographies. But basically, he would go into these places. Like he would go and he would travel and he would go to the person's village. He would talk to the neighbors, right? He would talk to where he went in shopping. He would ask about this guy in the village, and that's how he would put his book together. And after all that research, he would put this. I don't have access to any of the material that he had access to. I just don't. All of the resources that he had, I don't. At the end of the day, I have no choice except to do what here? What is one of the terms that we learned? I have to do taqlid. I have no choice except to trust him. When it comes to fiqh issues, is it possible that they had access to resources we don't have access to? The same way in hadith, is it possible that they have a fatwa from some sahabi? Is it possible that they heard from one of the students of the companions that he ruled saying like, yeah, hey, look, no, this is okay. We used to do it too. In such situations, it is very important to trust them. But if I have a situation where I see the ruling, I see the understanding for the ruling, and I see the basis for the ruling, and I fundamentally disagree with the basis and I have a grounds for it, can I disagree with the ruling? Can I challenge it or no? Yes, because I have all the steps of the method. But if I'm missing steps, it becomes a lot more difficult to what? To challenge. So these are things that are important to understand and to kind of help give an idea on how rulings are and why it's so important to stick to tradition. I had a brother ask me one time, he's like, but Sheikh, isn't it important to go back to the Quran and the Sunnah? I was like, yeah, absolutely. Like who is denying that? Nobody's denying going back to the Quran and the Sunnah. The problem comes in now. I said to the brother, I was like, okay, the Quran and the Sunnah, I said, according to what you're understanding, right? Like, ultimately, that's all you have. I said, I have your understanding and I have the understanding of the Imams and a number of scholars who support that Imam in his understanding. I said, you, to me, are somebody who is unknown. And these Imams, the whole Ummah has said what? That they're Imams. They said, no, we agree that these individuals are Imams. So now I have a choice. I can trust you or I can trust one of them. Huh? And you Sheikh, if you trust him more than the Imams, go for it. Like I'm okay with that. I would never do it because I don't understand how you put this person above these Imams. But again, ala kayfik. So it's important to understand, like, this is why we talk about respecting tradition. And not just that, you will find many of these individuals who claim, because it sounds very romantic, right? Me having this direct connection and going back to the Quran and the Sunnah. And I respect that. I can completely understand that. But at the end of the day, there's a process of understanding that's there. Okay, alhamdulillah. There's a process that's there, right? There's definitely a process that's there. And once you remove the process, you remove all of the integrity, you remove all of the work, you remove the entire tradition. And even after all of that, you will find 90% of the rulings that these, I would say, I don't want to use the word like vigilante, but like, it's a cowboyish type approach to dealing with the Quran and the Sunnah. You'll find most of the time that they're going to fall into a ruling that has already preceded them. There's nothing new that's coming out. Or they're going against everybody that preceded them, and you can see where the failure in the understanding was.
So
yeah.
if somebody comes and tells you, oh, you're telling us Mawlid, but the Prophet never did, and the Sahaba never did.
Sure.
So how come you
No, ahsant. So it depends on the understanding of it, right? So when it comes to the issue of Mawlid, for example, if somebody asked me, they said, okay, well, Mawlid is something, it's like you're treating it like a Eid. It's something that's happening every year. And because in the Prophet said, there are only what? There are only 2 Eids in Islam. How can you do that? My response is like, okay, well, we have a number of historic events that happen yearly that we speak about. Like, for example, before Ashura, what do we talk about? Right, depending on the masjid, right? So, I mean, I don't mind talking about Karbala. I think it's a very healthy discussion to have, but you'll have yearly a discussion on Karbala, or you'll have a discussion on what? The virtues of Ashura, right? And this is happening every single year. Before Ramadan comes, what happens in Sha'ban? You start talking about fasting. Before Dhul Hijjah starts, when you talk about in Dhul Qa'dah, what happens? You start talking about Hajj. These are events that are historic, that are happening, or they're seasonal, that are happening every single year. If I'm using them as historic markers, or if I'm using them as yearly markers to remember the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, or even remember an individual, I'm using it historically as a reminder. And where's the problem here? If I assign a specific virtue to that day, this is very different. But if I'm using it as a historic marker to remember the Prophet ﷺ versus assigning a specific virtue to it.
Why not any other day?
Hmm?
Why not any other day? Why does it have to be 12 of
The same way that we remember Karbala on the day that Hussein died. It's a historic marker.
You already declared al-bid'ah.
But no, that's fine. I mean, but the thing is, and who are the scholars that propose this? Right? You're talking about Ibn Taymiyyah and those that followed him. Right? Otherwise, anyone other than them, they didn't really find a problem with this. And the reason he did it is because of the Eid thing. He said anything that repeats is a problem. So my question is, people might be like, okay, well, I use the example of graduations. Graduation is a worldly event. So like I said, when I say historic marker, I say a worldly event. Historic marker, like a graduation. Someone might be like, well, graduation only happens once. It happens once for me as an individual. For the school, when does it happen? It happens every single year. So is the graduation now a bid'ah? It's not a religious thing. So I'm saying even these events, they're not religious events.
Well, you get them celebrating the Prophet.
So I can celebrate the Prophet. Okay, if you're saying I can celebrate it any other day, what is the problem with celebrating it on that day?
The Prophet never did it.
But he never celebrated another day either.
Yeah.
So don't celebrate the Prophet.
Yeah, don't celebrate the morning. Don't celebrate
So
the morning.
no, but I'm saying my response to be is like every single person deserves to be celebrated. Like as a father, as a mother, as a son, as an individual, everyone deserves to be celebrated. And the person who is first and foremost to be celebrated is the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
You more pious than Sahaba?
They also made certain, I make adhkar that they didn't make. I make dua that they didn't make. But none of these are claims that I'm better than them.
But that's why we declare all these things to that.
Because you don't do things that they did. So basically here, another example. And I know you're bothering me. But so what time do we pray Dhuhr at Dar Hijra? You guys know? 12:30. We pray it when? Every single day. The Prophet ﷺ didn't pray at 12:30.
Yeah.
We should pray it randomly.
You didn't have even a calendar.
You didn't even have a calendar.
Time schedule.
You're printing calendars for people, Akhi? They're breaking their fast at 6:17. Show me one hadith.
I like that. I like that.
No, but I'm saying the problem with this type of thinking is that the people who say these types of things are innovation, يؤدي للفوضى. It means that I am not supposed to put any type of consistency to my life. I'm supposed to pray at 12:30 today, 12:15 tomorrow, 12:45 the next day. It brings no consistency. Immediately after the death of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Quran was organized. The Sahaba started having awrad where they would have fixed readings of how much they would read of the Quran. Islam is supposed to bring consistency and order. It's not supposed to bring chaos. And may Allah bless us all, inshallah, give us understanding. Allahu a'lam wa sallallahu ala khayri khalqi nabiyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Huh?
I still have a problem with morning.
You know, it's going to be.
Oh, of course, yeah. No, but